Hey everyone, so I forgot to tell you in the first video why I'm making these videos about investing. Now, it is my personal belief that besides having your health and friends and family, which is important, that having money is the biggest factor in your life. It's like if you don't have a lot of money, I'm not saying you're going to be unhappy or there's any problem with your life, but it doesn't give you the freedom to do whatever you want whenever you want. Now, if you have a little bit of money, that's kind of nice. Maybe you could fly to some cheap country, live for a few years, but once you run out of money, you'll be back at zero and you'll have to get a job again and start building up your money, your nest egg again. But once your money reaches really high, like 500,000 US dollars or a million or more, there's this thing called the 3% rule or the 7% rule. I can't remember what it's called, but it means that if you spend 3 or 4% of your money will continue growing. So for example, say that you saved and invested really hard over the years and your money reached $1 million and you go to some cheap country and you decide you're going to spend 3% of that million, will give you about $30,000 a year or about $3,000 a month. And you'll spend 3%, you'll spend the 30K, about $3,000 a month, and your money will continue growing at 4% or more, which, is a great way to go, right? In some countries, on $3,000 a month, you can have a really great lifestyle. For maybe $1,000 a month, you can rent some really nice place in the center of the city, and that'll give you $2,000 a month to play with, and you can have luxury food, and you can travel and have massage, and you can really live it up, and you won't have to work at all. I mean, you can if you want, and your money will still grow, right? So, for some people, they think, oh, when I retire, I need 2 million, I need 3 million. But it really depends on your situation. Like, if you're going to own your house, you won't have to pay rent. Healthcare when you're older can get expensive if you're like in America where it's really expensive. Because personally, I live in Thailand. But these things really depend. And so the reason that I am making these investing videos is because if I could go back in time and talk to my future self, maybe at age 13, before I had this big birthday where I got some cash, I don't know how much cash I got, maybe $500 or something like that. Some of them were in these Series EE bonds, these old school American bonds. It's like if you buy a $50 bond, you pay $25, and then over, 10 or 20 years, it'll be worth $50. I just cashed out all those bonds right away. I didn't keep them for 20 years or anything. And some of them, by the time I cashed it out later, some of them were worth $28 or $29, something like that. But basically, if I could go back in time to when I was 13 or even 20, when I was working, and I was like, you know what? You really need to save your money and invest in the S&P 500 in low cost fund like VOO from Vanguard, or FXAIX, but I'm not sure when that fund actually started. But the point is that you need to save your money. You need to invest in a low cost S&P 500 index fund, and keep putting money in every month as much as you can. Whenever you have extra money, reinvest your dividends, never withdraw it. If I had been doing that since age 13 or in my early 20s, man, I would have a ton of money. I would have so much money. I mean, maybe I would even have $1 million, and then, I did go to some cheap country. I'm living in Thailand. If I had $1 million right now, I would be living like a king. I would have like this really fancy like place in the center of town, which I could have. I would be like traveling the world. I wouldn't have to work. My money would still be growing. I would live on 3% of that million, which is 30,000, which is about 3,000 a month or so. I could get these massages, this food, and I'd never have to worry about money again. And like, my life would be so cool. I just have all this money, And so it's like, if I could go back and tell myself, and I did it, and I had all this money, it would be wonderful. But I can't. So I'm making these videos, even though the algorithm on like, YouTube or TikTok or whatever will probably show it to barely anybody. But I'm making these videos so that, you can do it. Most people, it would take them at least 3 years if they ever decide to pull the trigger on investing. Most people, like, in their mind, it takes them a really long time to do something, like 1 to 3 years. It's not just like you're going to be like, hey, there's this thing called the S&P 500. There's a low-cost index fund, FXAIX. Why don't you just start putting $500 a month in there? And they're like, okay. And they just start doing it. Like, no way. What happens is, like, people are always thinking about stuff, and they're, like, talking to people, or maybe doing some research, or they're, just like, I don't know. It just takes people forever to do something. They're really scared of putting their money in there because, it's like, what if the market crashes, it goes down, and I lose all my money, and then I will never have any money, and I'll feel stupid, and, So, nobody's doing that, and it's, okay, honestly, I'm probably not going to be making videos for years and years, because I'll get bored of it. But, I don't know, it's like when you tell someone about investing, you're planting a seed into their mind. It's this little seed. And then like 2 or 3 months go by, and then, someone says something about investing, or they see the news, or this or that, and then if they think back and they're like, oh yeah, there was that one guy on YouTube who said I should invest. Maybe I will. And then like 3 months goes by, and then something else happens. Then a year or 2 later, maybe they're like, I think I'll just start investing like $50 a month, no big deal. And then they start doing it, and then their money starts growing, and they're like, okay, I'll put in 200 or 300 or whatever. And then eventually maybe they kind of start investing, and then they get serious about it. Now, if you were, like, I was reading on Reddit, and there was this guy who was like, I'm 17 years old, and I wanted to know if I should invest in VOO or FXAIX or VTI, and like all these little acronyms that some people have no idea what any of those things mean. Funny story, when I was a kid, like 10 years old, I asked this financial advisor, I said, I've got like $50 from my birthday and I want to invest it. What should I do? And she's like, well, you could put it in ABCDE or GHTQ or FXZ or FNILX. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I never did anything. I had no idea what those symbols meant. But a lot of people on Reddit were saying, like, man, you're so ahead of the game. I wish I started investing at 17, because once people are in their, 40s or 50s, it's not like they have 30 years for their money to grow, or 20 years necessarily, And like the difference between having like 10 years and having 30 years is astronomical. It's like a huge difference. 30 plus or more for your money to grow is really great. It's called the time value of money. Yeah, it's really great. So I'm making these videos to plant this little seed in your head, boop, and hope, like I'm hoping, that you become a serious investor. That you try to spend a bit less money. Like I had my friend in the UK, and he was telling me, yeah, when he was young, I mean, I don't know, he's maybe 30s now. I can't remember his age, maybe he's 30. He's like, yeah, when I was young in my 20s, I didn't know about investing, I didn't care, I had a job, I just went out to the pub and spent all this money on drinks and alcohol and hanging out. And then when I was like, now that I'm like 30, because I think he's been investing for like maybe 2 years, he's like, yeah, I don't want to spend all this money at the pub anymore. I want to put my money in investing in the S&P 500 so that it can grow for the next 20 or 30 years. So by the time he's, 50 or 60, he'll have a lot of cash.